Good day, everyone. I'm here to introduce to you our chosen topic, which is entitled Economic Globalization in terms of labor migration and the pandemic. Let us first define what is economic globalization. Economic globalization, in layman's terms, refers to the global mobility of people, capital, technology, goods, and services. It refers to how interdependent we have all become. Why interdependent? Because there is no resources that we don't depend to others. We need those resources in order for us to survive. That is why we depend to one another. There are five components of economic globalization, and one of that is migration. In our topic, let us define what is labor migration. Labor migration is the movement of an individual or a group of people from one nation to the other in search of employment. It is not new to us that the term OFW because in today's generation, it is considered to be our new hero. OFW was challenged because of the pandemic. What is pandemic? Pandemic is a widespread of disease over a whole country or the world. COVID 19 struck, and we are all unprepared, especially those people who are working outside the country. So, at this juncture, let us know the push and pull factors of labor migration in the Philippines, our overseas Filipino workers in their histories and their current situation, and the impact of pandemic on OFWs in our conclusions.
Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Atwil, and sorry I badly can't turn on my camera because I currently use screen recording on my cell phone. Now let's move on. I was assigned to report the push and pull factors of labor in the Philippines. Along with that, let us know first the definition of migration. So according to the International Organization for Migration, it refers to the movement of a person or group from one territory to another in search of a temporary or permanent residence. People migrate for various reasons, and these reasons may fall under these four categories such as political, environmental, cultural, and economic. Within these categories are what we call push and pull factors. So, in understanding the nature of migration will enlighten us whether it's beneficial or not, because the issues of globalizations are linked with migration and with the movement of capital and commodities. It can be said that migration is old as human civilization, and there is clear proof that globalization is inextricably related to it. The growing demand of laborers of the most capitalist countries precipitated the migration of many families from underprivileged communities. This goes with the hope of alleviating their economic conditions and experience a good life financially and economically. According to estimates, 20% of labor force in the Philippines want to leave the country and search for a job abroad. Unfortunately, some of them got a victim of human trafficking and illegal recruitment. Now let's get to know the reason for people migrating. And again, they are classified as four categories: the political, environmental, cultural, and economic. And these categories are so-called push and pull factors. Now let us know the difference between push and pull factors. When we say the push factors are those that motivate people to leave their country because of difficulties such as war, food storage, poverty, and among others, while the pull factors are those that attract them to their place of their destination. To illustrate the push and pull factors in the four categories, let us consider the following examples. First example, people can be politically motivated to migrate when they experience the push factors such as war, social unrest, or corruption, while they can also be politically motivated to migrate when they experience the pull factors such as political stability and obtaining good service from the government. Second example, People can also be environmentally motivated when they experience the push factors such as the occurrence of natural calamities in the form of earthquakes or typhoons. On the other hand, they are motivated to migrate or pull factors such as good climate. Third example, culturally, the push factors can be motivate people to migrate can be in the form of racial discrimination and bad educational system, and the pull factors can be in the form of equal respect for religion and the presence of family and friends. And lastly, under the economic category, the push factors can be unemployment and poverty. For the pull factors that people to migrate can be a good living conditions and job opportunities. That's all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anilibeb Adolfo, and I will discuss about the Overseas Filipino Workers, or OFWs, history and current situations. First, I will tackle about the history of labor migration in the Philippines. So, in the 1970s, the push factors were already quite strong. The push factors were already discussed by Mr. Atwil. So, push factors were worsened by the 1973 oil crisis. Ang kaning 1973 oil crisis kay mao ni siya ang time na ang OPEC or Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries kinag-oil embargo, meaning gistop nila ang pag-sell og oil sa US. Tungod ana, ang prices sa gas kay nitaas og ayo, and ang atong economy kinaapektuhan pud ana. So ang atong economic gains kay dili ka keep up sa atong population. Nag-struggle pud atong country mo provide og sakto nga jobs og sahod. Tungod kay kadil pud atong nga time og mga balance payment problems or mga utang sa atong country. At the same time, the GCC countries needed workers to realize their ambitious infrastructure projects. Ang GCC countries kay ang mga Middle Eastern countries. And lagi kay daghan man walay trabaho sa Philippines ato na time, meaning daghan og pwede sa labor migration. Temporary raman anta ang labor migration, hantod lang sa makabawi ang Philippines sa economic problems. Pero tungod kay taas jud ang demand sa workers sa GCC countries, og tungod pud sa lack of economic progress, unemployment ug low ang salary sa Philippines, so mas ni-fuel jud ang labor migration. So sa 1980s to 1990s, the service sector boomed and women began leaving to fill domestic and caregiving vacancies in the developed countries and around Asia. So ang kani nga time, diri na nagsugod ang pag adto sa lain country sa mga babae para magtrabaho og domestic helper o caregiver. So pag-abot sa 1993, mas nanaghan ang mga OFW nga babae kaysa sa lalaki. Sa makita ninyo sa graph, ang reason day ani kay tungod daghan mga babae ni apply sa jobs nga domestic helper, caregiver ug entertainer kay nidako man sad ang demand ana nga jobs ato nga time especially sa Japan. So mas ni-fuel ang labor migration na pud ani. So diri na ta sa 2000. So in 2005, the demand for entertainers in Japan jumped sharply. Kay tungod daghan babae ga-apply anang entertainer nga job, na controversial na siya kay ang perception sa mga tao kay ang mga babae daw nga entertainer kay naa daw sa sex industry. Tapos ang Japan pod kay nag-implement sila og mas strict na rules sa kwaon nilang entertainers tungod ana. Mao na ang reasons nganong ni baba. And in 2015, the domestic work was the top occupation for new hires. Kaya since di baba lagi ang pag-hire sa entertainers, mas nanaghan ang ni-apply sa domestic workers. So sa present, today, the Philippines is a major source of labor migrants for many countries across the globe. The sectors of seafaring, domestic work, and nursing are largely dominated by Filipinos. And temporary labor migration has become a way of life for many Filipino families. So ang labor migration kay nahimo na siyang common, acceptable, even desirable as an option or strategy for a better life. Sa makita ninyo sa graph, nagkadako jud ang labor migration, apa land-based ba kaha or sea-based. So sa 2006, nilapas jud og 1 million ang OFWs. Tapos sa 2015 lang, naabot og 1,844,000 ang Filipinos nga nag-work sa abroad. And then ang seafarers deployed sa atong country kinaara sa 20 to 22%, tapos ang land-based kay 78 to 80% every year. So mas daghan jud ang land-based. Next is laws for OFWs. Surfacing labor migration problems, including poor working conditions and abuse by employers, prompt the government to address migrant welfare and protection. So these are laws made for the protection and welfare for the OFWs. First, the 1995 Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act, RA 8042, an act to institute the policies of overseas employment and establish a higher standard of protection and promotion of the welfare of migrant workers, their families, and overseas Filipinos in distress, and for other purposes. So ang kani kay protection to labor, local and overseas, organized and unorganized workers. So dapat dili ma-compromise or ma-violate ang human rights and freedom sa Filipino workers ani. Second kay ang Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipino Act of 1995, RA 10022, aiming to further strengthen measures to protect migrant workers, their families, and other overseas Filipinos in distress. So ang kaning nga law kay gina-certify ang countries if safe or unsafe o kung ga-provide ba na og protection sa OFWs. Gina-mandate sa dani nga law na ang recruitment agencies or employers kay mag-provide og insurance para sa accidental death or disability and uban pang protection para sa mga OFWs. Third is the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration Act, RA 10801. Services and programs provided by the government should be gender responsive, taking into consideration the different impact of labor migration on men and women. So ang agency kay dapat mag-provide of programs and services para sa welfare sa mga OFWs, mapababae man or lalaki. Lastly, the expanded Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act of 2012, RA 10364, establishes the necessary institutional mechanisms to protect and support trafficked persons and provides penalties for its violators. So this combats trafficking and increases penalties for violators. And katong victims sa trafficking kay maka-access og support and assistance like free temporary shelter and other services under aning law. So we will now jump into the next slide and I will pass it on to Hart Villegas.
The pandemic on OFWs. The rise of COVID-19 pandemic affected the global economy. To ensure the safety and prevention of the virus, from the virus, there were limited entries and exits of people, domestic products, and imported products. Thus, there is a decrease in GDP. Overseas Filipino workers are one of the greatest contributors to the Philippines economy. However, they are also greatly affected by the COVID-19 virus. The loss of remittances affected the source of income of most Filipino families and the Philippine economy as a whole. According to Labor Secretary Sylvester Bello III, 809,374 OFWs were sent back to their homes as of November 28, 2021. The overseas Filipino workers were mostly displaced due to lockdowns that weakened the world's economies. With the increasing number of OFW returnees, the economy of the Philippines weakened. Returnees are expected to face no source of income and unemployment. OFW deployment during the pandemic. So what do we mean by job deployment? So a job deployment is the transfer of a worker from one position to another within the same or another area of employment. So in 2020, in the Philippines, the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, slowed down the deployment of OFWs to countries that have high positive cases. Total OFW deployment dropped from 2.2 million in 2019 to 549,800 in 2020. So the reduced number of deployed workers was primarily attributed to travel restrictions imposed in response to rising COVID-19 transmission rate. Immediately following the World Health Organization, the Philippines has declared a pandemic. The government has halted land and domestic air travel as well as sea travel. It also imposed a ban specifically on healthcare deployment workers to increase the number of medical professionals throughout the country. So there are effects of limited deployment to OFWs. The negative effects, first is work possibilities are being reduced. So with the limitation of deployment, there is a lesser probability for OFWs to find a good job abroad with a more high salary. So my explanation is already related to the second effect, which is loss of large income earned overseas. So I will no longer explain that. And the last effect is unemployment. Of course, with the limitation of deployment, some companies or bosses would be forced to find a new employee for that specific job for that OFW to be deployed. So if there are more delays, if late na po to-deploy ang isa ka specific OFW, then that company would choose an employee na mas dool na pwede nila i-employ. So the first positive effect is additional medical experts. So I have mentioned earlier that there is a limitation of deployment for medical experts in order to respond to the demand of medical experts in Philippine hospitals. So with the face of increasing positive COVID-19 cases, so there is a need for medical experts. So second is OFW safety. So this is the main reason why there is a limitation of deployment or limited deployment to ensure the health of the Filipinos and at least to ease the problem. And last is additional Filipino laborers. So what I mean to this effect is the more laborers not aside from the medical field, OFW displacement during the pandemic. So what is job displacement? So job displacement is typically defined as job loss induced by changing economic and business conditions. So job displacement is nawalan na gyud og trabaho. It could be either economic downturn sa isa ka country or it could be a company bankruptcy. So mao man nahitabo usually to countries today with the phase of the pandemic. So there are close of borders which resulted to economic downturn. So the increasing rate of positive cases in different countries resulted in quarantines and lockdowns, which led to job loss or unemployment. Borders of most countries closed in the year 2019, resulting in an economic downturn. Thus, there are limitations to everything. There were around 639,000 displaced OFWs as of April 11, 2021. The main effect of job displacement and OFWs is loss of income. So, mo ang effects sa job displacement. So, of course, directly, kung siya unemployment pay pasabot sa job displacement, of course, loss of income. So, loss of income for their family. So, dili lang ang OFW alone ang maapektuhan, but also the families of the OFWs. No? Unsa na lang ila ang gamiton for their daily needs. Second is increased rate of unemployment. Of course, unemployment is already a problem in the Philippines. Now, in the face of the pandemic, we have displacement and deployment problem that could lead to unemployment. So there would be an increase in rate of unemployment. And lastly is economic downturn. So this is a more general effect. So it could be a mix of loss of income and unemployment. So with increasing rate of unemployment and wala na mag-provide or there are no remittances, which is the greater effect for the for the Philippines economy with employment, loss of remittances, loss of source of income of Filipino families. So that is a pullback to the economy of the Philippines. And however, the government of the Philippines help OFWs. So there are Republic Act numbers 11469 and 11494 provided different forms of support to OFWs affected by the pandemic, including cash, free COVID-19 testing, lodging, food, and transportation. Financial assistance of 10,000 is also given to affected migrants under the Abot Kamay ang Pagtulong or AKAP program. And also the TESDA scholarships provided or offered to OFWs who returned home. So sa TESDA scholarships, there are also allowances given. The next reporter is Jerlyn Galorgana.
So, as from what you have heard, makaingon jud ta na grabe og impact or effects ang pandemic sa atua, especially for those people who are working outside the countries or from the other countries. And according sa surveys nga sugod atong 2020, there are nearly 1 million Filipinos ang gipauli diri sa Pilipinas, and the deployment pace has dropped dramatically. COVID-19 is not the first catastrophe nga atong na-encounter kay nakaagi na sad tag SARS, Ebola, and many more. But this COVID-19 pandemic is grabe jud siya impact that results to substantial job losses, migration, and repatriation. Therefore, makaingon jud ta na this pandemic adds to the precarity of an overseas Filipino worker's existence, primarily because of the economic and political ramifications that such public health crises bring. So, to conclude everything, this pandemic has had a significant influence on us, particularly on Filipinos who work in foreign countries. But despite this pandemic, makaingon Japon ta na grabe ka resilient o grabe ka maparaan ng mga Pinoy kay bisag kasagara sa mga overseas Filipino workers na pauli, pag nakakakita ra Japon sila alternative or other ways to provide their daily needs and wants. Ang uban is diri na lang na narbaho ba kasagara gyud kay nagtukod og mga businesses. And I guess that would be all. And again, I'm Jerlyn Talagalariana saying that COVID-19 will reshape our world. We don't yet know when the crisis will end, but we can be sure that by the time it does, our world will look very different. So be informed, be prepared, be smart, be safe, and be ready to fight COVID-19. And by the way, don't forget to get vaccinated. Thank you and may God bless us all.